I'm Nisha Zachary, and this is the Zigzag Leap, brought to you by Permission to Leap. For years, I've been talking to people about having permission to take a leap of faith. We all know that life doesn't happen in a straight line, so how do you overcome your past and possibly current circumstances to live the life you were created for? Stick around to hear our guest answers that will lend you some courage to give yourself permission to leap, no matter how twisted the path may be.
Hello, everyone. I am so glad that you are joining me today on Zigzag Leap. I have a very special guest. This is Katherine Marie, and she is here to help us more fully understand breast cancer and breast cancer awareness, and how that relates to the world at large and how it relates to even giving ourselves permission. So thank you so much for joining me, Katherine.
Thank you so much, Nisha. I'm so happy to be here today.
Awesome. So can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'll give a brief rundown and then you can jump in and ask me questions and tell me where you want to dive deeper. So my name is Katherine, and I am a speaker and a holistic health coach. I do specialize in coaching people who have been impacted by cancer. And in 2015, I was diagnosed suddenly with stage 3 breast cancer. And I went through traditional therapies. 3 weeks after diagnosis, I had a double mastectomy. And after I recovered from that, I went through 5 months of chemotherapy, 6 weeks of radiation. I had chosen to do a delayed reconstruction process. So my reconstruction began a year after I was diagnosed, and that process took a total of about a year and a half. And so the whole story is a really long one, and you can just let me know where you want to jump in and explore.
Well, being that you've gone through this experience, what is your definition of permission, and has it changed since before you went through this?
It probably has changed because I don't know that I would have thought it through prior to my cancer diagnosis. I like to say that cancer does not define me, but it has shaped me. And I say that because I have changed dramatically.
Of course.
And so I don't know that I would have thought much about permission prior to my cancer diagnosis. What I like to say permission is to me now is that it is acceptance that myself, or perhaps somebody else, is capable of moving forward and allowing change to occur as a result of that forward movement.
Oh, I love that. So in that forward movement, based on our conversation that we were having, your vision or your view of Breast Cancer Awareness Month has shifted. Obviously, having gone through this, it's a little bit different. So can you explain, what does Breast Cancer Awareness Month mean to you?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because I know prior to my diagnosis, I would see the media about all the walks and the fundraising and viewed it as, of course, a wonderful opportunity for people to have awareness. My perspective of it now is that many of the big name charities may be doing some really good things. However, much of the funding is not really going directly to help patients. So there is that aspect. In general, I feel like Breast Cancer Awareness Month can be triggering for people. And for me, I finished my chemotherapy in the month of September, and it was mid-September. And so I had gone back to my cancer center in October for a checkup. And when I went, the fountain outside the cancer center was pink. And that was very triggering for me because when I finished my chemotherapy, I actually did not want to be I didn't want to be reminded of all the trauma that I'd been through. And being
Okay.
surrounded by pink. So the fountain was a trigger. And then going shopping, there was pink surrounding me, people selling pink pens and pink different, everything was pink and pink ribbons and advertisements about walks and fundraising. And it was very triggering for me because at that point, I wanted to do nothing. I didn't want to think about cancer anymore. I had already been through so much trauma and pain, physical pain and emotional pain, that I wanted to escape it. And all that pink wasn't allowing me to. So that all of the pink can be triggering for patients, especially who recently have gone through treatment. For me, what Breast Cancer Awareness Month means is I find it my responsibility to encourage people to remember to do their self-exams and get screenings as appropriate. Second, I feel it's really important to be that person using platforms like this to be that sort of liaison that helps people understand that the struggles of a cancer patient don't necessarily end with treatment. There are ongoing issues that people experience, and the general public may not be aware. For example, I have what is called neuropathy. And so that is nerve pain, and mine is primarily in my feet. And I cannot physically walk without pain unless I have acupuncture once a month. So for me, it's really important that people understand that there are still struggles, even though 6.5 years out, I don't have active cancer. And lastly, one of the most important things for me for Breast Cancer Awareness Month is to really honor the people that have died from this disease. And personally, I can do that by living a healthy life and a joyous life. And I've learned that, yes, there can be cancer and there can be joy. And so for me to be healthy and joyous and live a purposeful life, that is how I honor those of the people that have died from cancer.
Wow. Okay. So I've got so many questions. In the midst of this traumatic experience, how do you find joy?
I found it with a friend, actually. That was my first real, well, okay, so I'm going to back up. The first time I really laughed, actually, when I had cancer, was actually with the first time I met my oncologist. And so this is just a short story, but I met my oncologist for the first time. Of course, I'm freaked out. I'm scared. I had just been through testing. A stranger had called me and told me I had cancer and set me up with an oncologist. And I'm meeting him for the first time, and he wanted to examine me. Now, my cancer was on my right side. And so I'm sitting on this table, and this doctor starts examining my left side. And I rolled my eyes and I said, it's the other side, thinking that this man had not read the charts and he was like trying to feel the cancer and all of that. And he looks at me and he says, I know, today you get a twofer. So he brought humor in at that moment. And that was like sporadic throughout my treatment, where I was able to try to look at things with humor. It was in the summer of 2016 when I had joined an online message board specifically for breast cancer patients. And I met somebody through the message boards that was in another state, and we quickly became close friends offline. Nice. At the time, she was stage 4. So it was actually really scary to become friends with her because she was dying from the same disease that I had in me. However, like I said, we quickly became close friends, and we would talk and we would text, and some days we would laugh and cry in the same conversation. We would talk about onion rings, and then we would talk about burial plots. And it was just, the two of us clicking and bonding. And it was that taught me really that you can have cancer and you can laugh at silly things.
Okay. So, in making friends with this person who has the same disease, is it helpful in some way because you do have this? So it's somebody that you can relate to, even though it's scary and you don't really know the outcome.
Yes, everything. So I joined these message boards, and I found that, and this is really good advice for cancer patients. I found you have to have really good boundaries, because you can join, there's social media groups, and there's online message boards. Like, for example, breastcancer.org has message boards specifically for breast cancer patients, but the American Cancer Society has different message boards for different cancers. And you just have to be really protective of your heart and soul, and know your boundaries. Because, for example, I would sometimes join some of the message boards and might be reading things that just scared me. It just made it almost made it worse. It made me
Wow.
more scared. And so that's when I knew it was time to put away the computer.
Gotcha.
And eventually I found some of the threads on the message boards where it was more community. It wasn't really about problem solving, and it wasn't the medical stuff. It was just, hey, what'd you do today? Did you watch a movie? Or, it was conversational.
Okay.
And I like to say there's the cancer threads, and then there's the social threads. And you just have to know yourself and know what you can handle. And there's sometimes the cancer threads, I would go for information. Like, for example, looking at information about reconstruction. But then there's some that I would go for socializing. And yes, with my friend Rachel, it was very hard, but very fulfilling to
Awesome.
be with somebody and walk the last year of their life with them.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that she had you at that particular time, and that you had her, obviously. So you mentioned the word boundaries, which is something that I absolutely love to talk about, because they're a huge part of giving yourself permission. And this walk of life is not easy if you don't have boundaries, but it's not easy to put boundaries in place. Have you found that putting boundaries in place has gotten easier since going through your experience, or is it more difficult now?
It's much easier. And I'll tell you why. Cancer changes you not only physically and emotionally, but it changes relationships.
Yeah.
And I think for myself, and sometimes I've heard from other people, once you face your mortality, you don't want to waste your time on stuff that doesn't matter. And so I have more boundaries, because I'm not going to waste my time on someone or something that isn't fulfilling, or that it doesn't feel right and doesn't feed my soul. And I don't have the patience for things that aren't good for me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh,
And
definitely.
it's not all just about me, or for example, a reciprocal relationship. If people aren't showing up for me, and I'm putting something into a relationship, I'm not going to waste my time. There's too much living to do. And so I have really healthy boundaries around relationships, in that if the relationship isn't a healthy relationship, I'm not going to continue it.
I love that. And that's a lesson that we can all take with us. Don't let people steal your joy, your energy.
Exactly.
There's a limited amount of time, and we don't know how much it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so switching gears just a little bit, because something I've heard you mention a few times is fear. So what are some steps that people who are going through cancer at the moment, what are some steps that they can do to manage their fear of reoccurrence of like while they're in the situation?
Right. This is a really big topic for me because I was in it. I was there. It was the summer of 2016 when I was in the midst of reconstruction, and I was really, really scared of recurrence. And I had a moment where I read something in one of those online message boards that changed me. And that was, this person said, I don't want to look back decades from now and realize I'd lived that entire time in fear. And that was a switch for me. And that made me start moving forward. And once I was able to move forward and I went back to school and started coaching people, I developed this strategy I call ABLE. And what the acronym stands for is acknowledge, breathe, listen, and execute. And essentially what that is acknowledging your feelings and really, giving that voice to it. For example, not just the fear, but what are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of dying. I'm afraid to leave my kids alone, and just diving deep into acknowledging your feelings. Using breathing techniques or perhaps meditation to really center and ground yourself, I think is really important, because once you calm that nervous system and center yourself, then you can listen. And by that, I mean, listen to that inner voice or that instinct. What do you need to do? Do you need to journal? Do you need to talk to a friend? Do you maybe need to make an appointment for a checkup that you've been procrastinating, right? What is it that you need to do for whatever fear that you have in the moment? And then execute, just put it in place. Just do it.
I love that. So that is actually a very good acronym for life in general. And I know that you have some information that people can download. So I will put the link for that underneath the videos. But in doing all of this, it sounds like you've learned to trust yourself more.
Yes.
Were you able to take the ABLE format before, and then afterwards you were able to put it into a concrete format? Or was it something that was completely evolving out of your experience?
Yeah, it just evolved out of my experience. And I feel like perhaps I maybe did some of it prior instinctually, but no, it's just something I developed as I moved forward with my coaching and it was really born out of reflecting what I needed and what I did do and what I didn't do right. And figuring out, how do I help people move from being stuck to taking action? Because for me, and a lot of cancer patients also say that fear of recurrence is so big, it's hard to move beyond it. And doctors don't help you with that, right? Really? So it's really learning how to just not be stuck. And so, yes, I have a download on my website that is a brief outline of this ABLE strategy. And I'm also in the process of writing a book, and that is going to be a deeper dive into that and taking action. And so I'm excited, and I would love it if people would just keep following me to learn more about when that book is coming out.
Okay, so we're going to get your follow information in a little bit so that they can do that, because this is going to be so helpful for so many people. Do you feel like you trust yourself more now that you've looking back on everything?
Definitely. And not just because of the cancer, but just because I've grown. I've just grown emotionally. I've learned to meditate. I've learned to reflect more. So definitely, and therefore, once you learn to reflect, you can trust that intuition.
Definitely. So looking back and, through your reflection, what are some things that you wish people knew or, had an awareness of that people just don't see when it comes to dealing with cancer patients or
Oh,
speaking to them?
yeah, so many things, so many things. So I would love friends and family to understand that it's the biggest roller coaster emotionally of any roller coaster that you can be on. I would encourage people to not share stories of other people that that are going through cancer treatment. For example, newly diagnosed people might say, "Oh, I know so and so, and they had the same kind of cancer, and blah blah blah." And oops, they're not alive anymore. But
Oh, wow.
and that actually happens to a lot of people.
Oh,
I'd love for people to also watch their language, and by that I mean, for example, warrior, fighter, um, survivor. Just watch your language, because some of the battle language does not resonate with some people, and
mhm.
for others it does. So I encourage you to just pay attention to whatever the patient language the patient uses, and use that language.
Awesome. So on the flip side of that, what do you wish people would do?
You know, one of the best things people did for me was provide meals. That was very, very helpful. So that's a physical, actionable thing that you can
Mhm.
communicate and talk, to the patient about whether or not that would be helpful to them.
Right.
Or even just use your strengths. Like if you're a person that's really good at laundry, for example, you could offer to pick up laundry, take it home, wash it, and bring it back. So that is really, really helpful. The biggest thing you can do is to listen and just show up and allow that person to say anything, right? And
Right.
so many times people shy away from the real stuff that's going on,
Mhm.
but just showing up and listening is golden.
I love it. Okay, so once it's all over, what are some things that people might face afterwards that you want to help them prepare for?
After treatment for the cancer
Right.
patients. Oh goodness. So of course there's the breast cancer awareness and the triggers.
Mhm.
With that, there's also triggers with ongoing medical appointments. And so, for example, for myself, even 6.5 years out, I see my doctor every 3 months.
Wow.
And with that comes blood work. And even though I feel healthy, until I hear him say everything looks good, it can bring anxiety.
Right.
And um, some people get scans, some people just have doctor checkups. So I encourage people to manage that with some breathing techniques, right? To get through
Mhm.
those really anxiety times. People might face, for example, with breast cancer patients, I have compression garments on my arm and my hand because I had lymph nodes removed. And if I don't wear the compression garments, my arm swells. And like I said, I have neuropathy in my feet. So I have ongoing medications that cause me to lose my hair. And so there are many, many side effects that cancer patients manage on an ongoing basis.
Right.
And the fear is a big one as well.
Right. Which you have the information to be able to help people if they just even if they don't want to talk to somebody right now, you have the information that can help them stop and breathe
Absolutely.
and work through that on their own. So that's awesome. The last question that I have for you is what how do you move forward on a daily basis, giving yourself permission to live the life that you want now?
I, I, how do I move forward? That's a good question. I'm gonna pause for a second and see if I can absorb that. I, I move forward always with the thought, honestly, it's about my children. So one part of my story I didn't share previously is that I have 2 children who were born premature and who also have special needs. And so honestly, being a mom is the best thing I ever did in life. And it is at my heart, and they are at the center of my heart. And that is what keeps me going every single day, is the unconditional love between the 3 of us. And yeah, that's what fuels me. And then being their caregiver has taught me to be a natural caregiver to others. And that just keeps me going every single day, is wanting to go forward. And my mission is just to share with others what I have experienced so that they can go forward and hopefully get through it better.
That's wonderful. Okay, so how can people follow you, find out more about your story, and what's coming up next for you?
Yes, thank you. So my website is inspiredvitality.life, and other social media platforms, it might say, like, for example, Facebook is Inspired Vitality in Minnesota, or Inspired MN on Twitter, that sort of thing. But inspiredvitality.life is the website. That's where the downloads are, and all the links to the other social media platforms.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. I love your definition of permission and the idea of moving forward despite your life circumstances. Again, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Nisha. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from Permission to Leap, go to permissiontoleap.com and subscribe to our email list. When you do, we'll send you a digital leap guide. Thanks again, and talk to you next time.